Alright, so before we do any transactions, we have to obviously configure the system. So let's look at some of the configuration options. So we go into initial configuration. Now since we are learning about invoicing only, we don't need to configure much. So we'll very briefly look at the configuration options and do the configuration which is required for invoicing. So as you can see on the initial configuration, the first thing we should update is the company name. Now in this case, let us assume that I am a manufacturer of, let's say, cycles and some auto parts, and let's name this fictitious company as Nova Cycles. So I'll put in the company name Nova Cycles and Automotives. Alright, this is the company name. Now I can have a single address which can be the registered address as well as the factory or the works address, but I can also have two different addresses, which means the registered address can be different and the factory or work and the administration office can be different. So either I can use both or you can put just one. So let's say so likewise I can put in various information. Now what's important to understand is what is the impact of this. Now typically the impact of this will be visible when you will be printing your invoices or making your invoices, because what we usually do is pick our information of address and the company name from this screen, so that when anything changes on the address front, for example your mobile number needs to be changed on the invoice, or telephone number needs to be changed, or maybe website or email address or some things like that need to be changed, we don't have to change the format of the invoice, which means the report file will not require any modification. What we'll just require is changing the data over here, and it will automatically reflect in the invoices further. Alright, now there is one thing important to understand is that if you change something here, then obviously the invoices further on will have the new address. But if you print an invoice which has been created earlier and you're printing it again today, then also it will show the new address, because it is not saving the company's address with the invoice, it is picking it from here. So if you want your invoices that you have made to reflect the address on that particular date, it would be a good idea to keep a PDF copy of the invoice that you create, so that you can refer to it and maybe keep a physical printout in your file, so that you can refer to it if required. Now the next thing that we need to understand is the rounding part. Now obviously this will also depend upon the type of business you are doing. For example, in retail you might actually go with no rounding. Alright, that's what some of our retailers who've been using this system have been doing, because it doesn't suit them. However, in other businesses you might want a rounding method. So typically you want a default rounding method, which means 50 paisa and above have to be rounded to the next higher value and lower to the lower value. And same goes for the document totals. So tax amounts and document totals can be rounded off like this. Prices, usually people don't round off, but if it is applicable to you, you can use it, otherwise you can leave it. So these are the two settings that you need to do, but let us briefly look at what are the rest of options. So this is an email setting place where you can put in the details of the email which will be used to send any emails out of the system, right? So if you have any address like no reply at novacycles.com, you can configure that here, so that if you are using this system to send your quotations or maybe purchase orders, so this email address will be used to send those documents to your customers or vendors, right? Then we have some packing methods. Now packing methods again can be used in invoices if you are using different packing methods and they have to be printed on the invoice. We'll visit this again when we'll be doing invoicing later on. So right now we'll just leave it as it is and come back to it later. Then there are some reports that can be automatically sent via email, and your invoice can also be sent automatically. So again, we'll look at this later. Then this is more of the backup methodology that the product has. So again, we'll not look at it right now. And here we have the manage inventory section. Now manage inventory section is if you want to manage your inventory along with invoicing. Now why would you want to do that? You would want to do that if you want control. So for example, if you have an X item and 10 quantity of that X item in your stock, and if somebody is trying to invoice quantity more than 10, then obviously the system should stop him. Now if that is the case with you, wherein you want a control over how much is being invoiced and nothing can be over invoiced, then you can use manage inventory and manage your inventory in this. Now if you are trying to do that, then you will also have to manage your purchases, because otherwise how will you manage your inventory? Correct. And yes, you can have multiple warehouses in the system, and accordingly you can use the purchase transactions to increase your inventory, and then inventory transfers can be done and sales can further reduce your inventory, right? So that cycle is available. If you want, you can use this. Otherwise, if you don't tick this, which is by default unticked, which will mean that you are not managing inventory, so any transactions will not have any impact on the inventory levels, which means the system is actually not going to keep any inventory levels maintained for you. Alright, so we'll look at more of the things later on. Right now, what we wanted to do was put in some basic details. We'll put in these details also later on and put in the rounding options, and then we can say update. And as I said previously, you can see that the messages that arrive in the system are at the bottom, right? So this is as far as the basic configuration is concerned. Next, we can move on to the other aspects of configuration,